How's it going? This is Luke from Coffee House, and today we have a long-term review of the Flair 58. This is clearly a very highly reviewed product, especially for kind of like initial impressions, first couple weeks or things like that. And so what I wanted to do was kind of give it a 90-day approach, do something that has a multi-month span. And I've used this for 90 days straight, every single morning since it's gotten to my doorstep. So this is more of an approach to that. There are other great kind of initial impression reviews. James Hoffman, Lance Hedrick have many great reviews on this and a lot of great information. So there's definitely more out there that you can tune into. What I wanted to do is give my own take on this, tell you a little bit about what I know, what I've experienced, and then go from there. First things first is I want to give a thank you and a shout out to the Flair team for getting this over to us, and also a thank you to Tanner Colson, friend of the show, as you may know from TikTok fame, is a very well-known coffee creator in the space, and a very talented coffee enthusiast. That said, again, thank you for sending this out. We very much appreciate it. Let's go ahead and jump into first kind of the fit and finish, the looks, what comes in the box, how we put it together, and everything like that. All right, so this is everything you get when you purchase a Flair, everything that comes in the box. And to be honest with you, I was pretty confused when it first came in. I really didn't quite understand it. And while I am an espresso tech, I was a little thrown off with how to get this all together. But clearly I've figured it out in the last 90 days. But let's talk about the individual parts of this, and then I'll show you how I put it together, which is actually pretty easy from a workflow perspective once you kind of understand how it works. First thing in the box is this nice little tamper here. Not something that I actually use in my workflow. I think it's a little small. Maybe if you have some little tiny hands, this is good for you. But yeah, kind of a nice little portable tamper there. Next, you get a 18-gram IMS basket and a little bottomless portafilter here with a nice little wood handle. So go ahead, click that in, and that's that guy. Another important thing is Flair has decided to use no water dispersion techniques for the actual group head here. What you do use is this little screen right here. This is actually for your water dispersion, so you cannot go without this. Just something to think about. This is very important, and I'll also show you how to clean it down the road in the video. Next thing in the kind of extras is this little drip tray, nice little kind of rubber drip tray. I like it. It's no complaints. It's pretty standard. It's what I still use, and it fits a Lunar perfectly, which is clearly what they have designed it to do. Obviously, you have the actual base here and the heated group head. The heated group is connected by this little wire here with a button that allows you to do 3 different settings, low, medium, and high for heat settings. And what that heat does is it actually heats the group head here to allow for a consistent temperature through your brew, which is extremely important, as many of you may know. I don't particularly love all of the wiring that comes with this. You get this big box, you get this, and you just get a lot of cords and things like that. And there are some specific instruction as to not unplug certain kind of ways, like not unplug here, but unplug here. And it's in the manual, and it kind of freaks people out. I haven't had any personal issues with it, but it is quite a bit of an afterthought, it almost feels like to me. I would have much rather have had kind of like a button on the actual base of the machine, but I do understand from a manufacturing standpoint that that is not entirely the most cost-effective way to go about this. Physically though, everything feels solid, everything feels well built. There's no kind of manufacturing defects. I haven't seen any wear over the last 90 days. Maybe you'll see this wood kind of wear down over the, as water gets on it and everything like that, but ultimately no complaints. Inside of the brew chamber, you have the actual bit that pushes your water down. So this is 2 little O-rings here. This metal piece kind of just slides right into place under here. And you gotta just, obviously it's a tight fit, but one thing you're gonna feel is probably those O-rings degrading over time, but that's really a small price to pay for a unit that makes espresso as good as this. Next, something new in the Flair 58 lineup. If you have the older model, you might not have this. If you have the newer model, you may know what this is, but this is a little brew arm that kind of keeps everything connected. So you're not, from a workflow perspective, having to put this in, take it out, put it in, take it out, all of that, which I thought was pretty detrimental to the workflow of this machine. So what we're gonna do is go ahead, put the pressure gauge right in here, go ahead and bring the arm back down, lower it into place. And as you do this, you'll get a little bit more into the feel of kind of how everything goes together, but ultimately you'll get pretty comfortable with it pretty quick. It's just sometimes you'll need a little bit of finicking to get it perfectly into place. So now that we're back into place here, we are ready to brew, almost. One thing I want to talk about is this pressure gauge, which I think is really, really useful. Obviously, it's great for targeting a certain pressure, especially if you want to do a level of pre-infusion and then kind of crank it, hold it at 9 bars. It's actually pretty easy to do. I found myself without a mirror, kind of like squatting down in a really interesting position, watching kind of how espresso goes through. However, though, I think it's really manageable. I think holding it at 9 bars was a lot easier than I thought. I was a little concerned with that as it kind of showed up first. I was like, it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be difficult to replicate. But it's actually pretty easy to replicate, which is nice. Another company out there actually manufactures a pressure gauge that is Bluetooth, so you can hook it up to your phone and do kind of like decent recipes, which is pretty interesting. But I think this is really useful to have, and obviously the main thing you're going to want to look at from a point of reference is this little pressure gauge. In terms of exterior impressions, I think the Flair is good. I think that there are definitely ways that this can be improved. I think it's pretty good overall. I think everything feels solid, feels well built, but it's just not the best looking thing in my opinion. I think there are ways to make this look a little bit better. And then I think the wires, like I said, were maybe a little bit of an afterthought, but I know they did just release the 58X, which has some nice kind of exterior modifications. It does have the mirror, which I was just talking about, and it also has a cord that disconnects right here. Otherwise, it's really no big changes there, but I do like the fact that you can kind of disconnect it here. I think it makes for a more portable unit overall, but this, maybe 8 out of 10, no serious complaints about the looks or the exterior finishes or anything like that. But more importantly than the exterior finish are the coffee impressions. And initially, I was a little worried about this. I didn't know if it was going to be able to do the job that I wanted it to do, but boy, was I wrong. This Flair 58 does one of the best jobs at the price point for making cafe level espresso at home. So obviously you can't steam milk with this. There's no wand, no boiler, anything like that. But what you can do is you can make espresso that is as good as cafe level espresso for a fraction of the price. Not only are you able to get good shots out of this, but you're also able to modulate those shots. So whether you're doing turbo shots or different Rayo methods or things like that with paper filters, everything, you can do some really unique profiling with this specific machine, which I think is awesome. And it's funny because calling it a machine really isn't even appropriate, you know? It's one heating element and that's it. The rest is all manual, which I love. I love the idea that you're avoiding the complexities of these machines, trying to take apart heated groups and all of those things. But the question is, without all of those mechanics, am I really left with a good cup of coffee? And like I said, the answer is yes. Making great espresso with this is actually easier than I thought, and actually way more intuitive than I thought as well, which leads me into the workflow impressions. All right, so let's talk about the workflow impressions of this a little bit, because I think it's actually pretty interesting. Originally, I didn't think that I was gonna love this from a workflow perspective, because it had the little arm and all that, and pouring the water with the gooseneck kettle or anything like that was just not my favorite thing. But I think the workflow impressions are actually pretty good on this. Obviously, with this heated group here, what you're gonna have to do is still have a gooseneck kettle with temperature management. If you want to, obviously, just always pour boiling water, which is what I do, you're gonna be fine having any type of kettle, but having a gooseneck kettle with temperature management will help a lot. Obviously, that's another $100-200 you're gonna have to add into your espresso lineup, but I would imagine people purchasing this already had a gooseneck kettle, so likely they're going to be able to have that pair ready for them when they order this. So obviously, yes, you're going to need your own level of thermal management when you do purchase this, but it is actually pretty consistent as well. I was worried about this not brewing hot enough for espresso, but it actually does a pretty good job. The brew chamber on this shoots for that 93-94 degrees Celsius window that you want when you're brewing espresso, which I actually really enjoy. It's actually so intuitive that I've seen some cafes around here use these, which I think is crazy. Personally, I wouldn't do that, but I think from a workflow perspective, I can understand why at this price point it might be enticing for a low-budget cafe to do something like that. I think this is a really intuitive machine, and I think that people who are especially nerding out in coffee are gonna love using something like this because it takes away all of the minutia of all of these machines that need so much help and repairs and maintenance and everything like that. There are many machines for the home level that I have spent way more than $500 on repairs and maintenance and parts and getting everything right, and not to mention all of the forums, digging around, getting that information ready, when this, at the end of the day, is just one heated group and a couple metal CNC'd parts. So I wanted to take a pause in this review to talk a little bit about this screen here and how you actually clean it, because I've been to so many people's houses where they have these Flairs, but they don't actually clean this as well as they should. Obviously rinsing water through this will help, but it's not going to get all of the little dirt bits out of here. So what I'm gonna do is show you how I personally clean this. And if you're making more than one shot a day, this is absolutely something that you should do every time. What I'm gonna do is take the screen and put it in some water here, and then I'm gonna add just a couple grams of Cafiza. So I don't know, 3 grams or so, kind of what you would use for a normal espresso cleaning. Once you have those in there, you're just gonna go ahead and seal it up. I like to just make sure it's kind of in a watertight container like this, and you're just gonna go ahead and give it a shake. So, just shake it around, make sure that all of the actual Cafiza powder is dissolved. You're just gonna go ahead and shake this for a good minute or so, but as you can see, the watercolor is already turning kind of a brownish hue, which means that there's some coffee dirt hiding in there. And with coffee dirt comes another bad tasting shot. Obviously, we want to avoid that, have our shots tasting as good as possible. So doing this is a great little addition to your cleaning routine. So this, after even a couple shots, is what was hiding in the actual screen there. So something, obviously, we would like to avoid going forward. So 90 days later, here we are. This is something that I've used every single day for the last 3 months, and I found a great deal of enjoyment in having something like this. Not only because I'm getting good coffee out of it, but I'm also not bogged down with the idea of spending $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on an espresso machine. I think that this is a great entry-level point, not only from the price perspective, but also the idea that it forces you to be able to understand kind of the mechanics behind espresso. Temperature, pressure, and profiling are obviously all key words when talking about espresso basics, and the Flair 58, by being able to control all of those basics, I think it's a really great educational tool, not only for baristas who are just getting into the space, but also for people who are great professionals in the space. This allows for you to be able to take your espresso to the next level, evaluate your coffee on the next level, and understand how all of those metrics come into play when expressing your coffee at the end of the day. Personally, I think that if you're looking for espresso at home and you're not too enthusiastic about the milk side of things, I think that this is a great stepping stone in the right direction for your espresso lineup at home. I think the workflow is great, I think the price point is great, and I think at the end of the day, the value is most important here, because what you get out of this is you get that cafe level of espresso with such a small barrier to entry when talking about price. So I think when it comes down to my final thoughts about the Flair 58, I think the word that I use all the time is value. I think the value of the Flair 58 is bar none, and I think it's really interesting because not only are you able to get really great coffee at home, but you're also obviously able to get it at a great price point. This, I think, when compared to other machines in this price bracket, is going to yield a much better result. And I think that exceeding kind of outside of that, spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 is obviously an option. And there are some drawbacks from a workflow perspective by using something like this, but I think there's a fair enough trade-off there. I think you get more value out of spending $575 when you still are kind of just getting into the space. I also know many serious professionals who use these at their own homes as well, which I think is a great testament to the Flair 58's usability, not only in the home setting, but in the professional setting as well. And so 90 days later, the Flair 58, how does it stack up? Personally, before this, I had a machine that was much more expensive at my house, but I almost enjoy doing this kind of a little bit more therapeutic manual type of espresso making at home. I think that being able to use the same coffee every day and do all these types of pressure profiling and things like that actually yields a pretty rewarding result for me at the home level. So 90 days later, the Flair 58 has become almost a staple in my kitchen. I think it's something that I thought originally I wasn't going to love, but after using it for so long and really starting to nerd out about all of the different things that you can do, it's a really great user tool. I'm going to continue keeping the Flair 58 in my house and continue to refine all of the things that I've nerded out about coffee. This feels like almost like a reawakening for me, because once you get to the point in the professional world of coffee, you start looking at, okay, I've got a linea, I've got this, I can just hit it. It'll always be perfect every time, and I might need to make just some micro adjustments on my grinder. Coffee's always gonna taste good. But with this, I'm really forced to start trying new things, start modulating my espresso on a much larger scale, and that ability to kind of control that pressure right at the palm of your hands makes it really enticing to do some unique things with this Flair 58. At the end of the day, I would recommend this to anybody who's interested in getting espresso at home for a fair price point. And I think that this not only will satisfy the needs of the consumer just getting into the space, but it'll also satisfy the needs of the professional looking to tinker around with coffee just a little bit more. I think that's everything I have for you. Again, I'm Luke from Coffee House. I appreciate you tuning in, and I appreciate Tanner and the crew at Flair for sending this out and allowing me the multiple months to really form an opinion on where the Flair sits in my life, and that's everything I have. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you'd like us to watch or review or do anything else in the coffee world, and we'll see you next time.